Let's take a look at validating data entry. When you're collecting data, accuracy and consistency is important. To ensure that correct data is entered and stored in a worksheet, you can use data validation. So with each validation rule, you can define criteria for that data, what can be entered, and what you want to see in that cell. You can also add input and error alert messages for the user when they're entering something wrong in that cell or range. So let's take a look at this example here. Say I'm keeping track of attorneys, what area of law that they're practicing in, and what state and a date a case was open. And now over here, I just simply want to do a formula to count how many cases were filed in Colorado. Now this would be a count if function. Count if the criteria equals Colorado. Well, this happens time and again, and I've seen it so many times. Can you do that if you have, even yourself, if you're not consistent with entering data? But a lot of times, if you have multiple people updating a spreadsheet, everyone's going to have their idea of how to enter data. So as you can see here for the state of Colorado, you could just put CO. Maybe your abbreviation is 4 digits, COLO. Or maybe you spell Colorado out. The same thing for any of the other states. So now if I just want to simply count how many cases were filed in Colorado, it's really not that simple anymore, especially if this data just goes and goes. If I had thousands of rows of data and I'm tracking cases, what am I going to have to do? I'm going to have to sort and filter. I might have to set up a few different formulas so it would count everything. Wouldn't this be much easier if everything were consistent? Well, you can preach that all you want to users, or you could even tell yourself, but when you're doing data entry, you don't always remember. You can't always get someone to understand why it needs to be done and therefore to do it. So you set up a validation rule. And one that I use over and over is the list validation. So there's a couple of ways that we can do this. So I'll just do it for one cell right here. I'm going to, on my data tab, data validation, and I'm going to choose a list. Now, if I just have a few things, maybe I have Colorado, I have Kansas, and I have Nebraska. See if I can spell that right. So a few things, I can just enter them directly into source separated by a comma. Now what I get in this cell is just going to be a drop-down list so the end user can just choose. Now if you have multiple, like let's go to the sheet right here. If I have a whole list of states that maybe we cover, that's a whole lot just to enter manually. So I'm going to use this list as my source. So again, I'm going to go to my data tab, data validation. Again, I'm going to choose list. This time my source is going to be on that separate sheet. I'm going to select that range. And okay, now when I click that drop down arrow, there's all my choices right here. So the project is going to take you a step further into this. You're going to be adding input messages and error messages. But the data validation, again, the list is something that I have over and over just to make sure that I get consistent data. Now, if you want to apply this to an entire range, you can just select that in the range you want to apply the data validation to. I think that's because I had just done something, so we'll ignore that. And I'll go into list, and again I'm going to select where my source is. And okay, now notice all the cells that I click on, I have that drop-down list. Okay, let me know if you're having any questions with this part of your project.